Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Jim Reads Too Slow. And this is the first of my two catch-up uh, reports for Horror Mayhem, which of course is a month-long dive into short horror fiction created by Scott and Becky over at the Bookish Bryants. So week two of Horror Mayhem was movie horror. And I I kept it pretty simple. I read Children of the Corn by Stephen King. I always throw a little Stephen King story into this thing. And this one wasn't too bad. I hadn't read it before, probably should have, but it seemed a lot better to me after watching the movie adaptation of the story. The story has got a town full of children who are part of a religious cult that worships, in an extreme Christian fundamentalist way, a monster in the cornfields, known as He Who Walks Behind the Rows. These cornfields are in the middle of Nebraska, as it turns out, which would have made this perfect for me for week one if I had thought about it, which I didn't. So, anyway, corn plays a big part in this story. It's really kind of corn horror, I guess you would call it. And really it's really unfortunate that we didn't have any agricultural or grain categories in our bingo card this year. So maybe we can work that out next year. And the story has a squabbling couple, okay, on the verge of divorce, who, while they're driving out to the West Coast from the East Coast, stumble into all this this town full of cultish children, and then cluelessly keep on stumbling around until they can't get out. Now, the story begins sort of mid-argument as this couple are driving down the road and they hit a little kid, only to discover that he was either already dead or would have died shortly because his throat had been cut. Warning sign number one. So, of course, what do? They pick the kid up, wrap him in a blanket, put him in their trunk, and head off in search of law enforcement. This is the 1970s, remember? This was apparently before anyone knew anything about crime scenes and not touching evidence or running off with bodies or, evidence. So they enter the town of Gatlin, Nebraska, ignoring all the horror story warning signs, including the wife, Vicky, who is nonstop telling her husband to stop, turn around, and get out of there. Go to Grand Island, 75 miles away or however far. But he, typical man, he drives on into town, stops in front of the church being the only building that looks like it's being kept up or used in the past 10 years. Otherwise, Gatlin is a ghost town. So Bert, the husband, takes Vicky's keys because she's not leaving the car, and he doesn't want to leave her uh, in the car with a way to get away while he's wandering around in this church looking for law enforcement. So inside the church, Bert, he kind of takes his sweet time, discovering what's really going on in this town. So several years before the start of the story, the kids all got together and killed all the adults. Anyone who reaches age 19 subsequently is sacrificed to the monster in the cornfield. Now, while Bert is learning all of this, the kids outside surround the car and snatch Vicky and take her out to the cornfield. Well, Bert, he gets attacked. He gets wounded, and he kills one of the kids in the ensuing scuffle. Now, in the shock that caused, he runs away with the kids hot on his heels. Now he ducks into a cornfield, and then he manages to find the clearing where all the sacrifices happen. Uh, he also finds what's left of Vicky. And while with the Stephen King short story, there is no happy ending. Still, it is kind of a fun story, I guess, if you like horror stories. I would recommend it. It's not great, but it's not too long. It is a little creepy. It's foreboding. He sets the mood fairly well, and it's one of the better Stephen King stories that I have read, which admittedly, aren't really that many. The story was first published in Penthouse magazine in 1977, and then it appeared in King's 1978 collection, Night Shift, which a lot of you have. Now, the short story has spawned an endless string of horror movies and sequels of the sequels and reboots. Um, I watched the first, I guess you could call it big budget one, the first Children of the Corn, 1984's Children of the Corn, starring Peter Horton, best known for his role in the late 70s or late 80s TV show 30 something, if any of you are old enough to remember that, and Linda Hamilton from the Terminator franchise. This is the couple. Now, after reading the story, the movie is watchable because it is so bad. That's the way I would put it. It was directed by Fritz Kirsch, with the screenplay by George Goldsmith, and they used the general framework of this small town inhabited by a cult of killer kids, serving a corn monster, and then they kind of went their own way after that. The couple in the movie are newlyweds. There are some good kids in the movie, kids who help them out and save them throughout, at times throughout the movie. And it has a happy ending, except that there's still a dead kid in the trunk of the car when the movie's over, which understandably, given all that happens in the movie, they seem to have forgotten about. Now, the movie drags terribly in some places. The kids, especially the leaders, are pretty creepy until they open their mouths. And then the spell is broken, for me at least, when they start speaking this kind of culty King James English. That kind of actually made me laugh at times. And the special effects are pretty lame too. So Children of the Corn, I would recommend it just for the experience, to tell you the truth. So there we have it. Children of the Corn by Stephen King, followed by the movie Children of the Corn. And on the bingo card, I checked off religious horror and killer kids. And so that's it. That's it for week 2 for me, movie horror. So week 3 was classic horror, and I will cover that in my next video, which will be coming shortly. So until then, have a good one, BookTube.